There is a conversation happening right now outside your window. It has been happening every single morning of your life. And until this moment, you probably never knew you were part of it. Not near it, not beside it, part of it. The birds in your yard are not just singing. They are exchanging information with a precision that would make most human systems look primitive. They are tracking patterns, reading intentions, sending warnings, passing along memories. And woven into that conversation quietly and consistently is something researchers never expected to find. Your name, not your actual name. Something closer to your signature. A recognition so specific, so layered, that it challenges everything we thought we understood about the minds of small wild creatures. And the unsettling part, the part most people never get told, is that this recognition has been building for longer than you realize. Every time you walked past that window, every time you stepped into the garden, every time you simply existed near them, they were watching, cataloging, deciding. But what were they deciding? And what exactly have they been saying? The yard looked ordinary this morning. But ordinary is not the same as empty. Scientists spent decades assuming birdsong was simple, repetitive, instinct-driven. A kind of biological background noise with limited meaning. It was a comfortable assumption. It was also spectacularly wrong. What started unraveling that assumption was not one dramatic discovery, but a slow accumulation of details that refused to fit the old story. Details that kept pointing towards something far stranger and far more intimate than anyone was prepared for. Take the chickadee. That small, effortless bird that visits feeders across North America and seems almost cheerfully unaware of the complexity around it. Researchers at the University of Washington found that chickadees encode specific threat information directly inside their calls. The number of D notes at the end of their chickadee-di-est alarm call is not random. It is a precise message. More syllables mean greater danger. Smaller, more agile predators, the kind most difficult to escape, trigger longer, more urgent strings. Larger predators get fewer notes because they are easier to track and flee. That means a bird the size of your fist is broadcasting a real-time threat assessment to every creature within earshot. And every creature within earshot understands it. Other species stop and listen. Squirrels pause. Different birds adjust their behavior. An entire community shifts based on the content of a call most humans hear as charming background noise. The yard is not quiet. It is full of language. You just did not have the translation. But that is only the beginning of what is being said. In 2012, something happened at a research site in Seattle that changed the direction of the entire field. Scientists studying American crows began wearing specific masks while conducting work the crows found threatening, capturing, and banding birds for study. They wanted to know if individual crows would recognize the dangerous faces. What they found instead was something they had not designed the study to discover. Not only did the crows recognize the masks, they taught that recognition to others. Crows that had never personally experienced the researchers began scolding the masks. Juveniles who had not yet hatched when the original captures happened learned the face from their parents and from community members. Years later, crows in areas nowhere near the original study site were already primed with secondhand warnings about a specific human face they had never personally encountered. The information had traveled through calls, through behavior, through something that looked uncomfortably like cultural transmission. They were talking about humans, specifically, and the conversation was spreading. What happens in your yard operates on that same principle, whether you have ever considered it or not. The birds that visit you are not treating you as a neutral feature of the landscape. You have already been assessed. You have already been discussed. The question is simply what has been decided. Researchers studying European great tits found that these birds maintain something researchers cautiously call reputational knowledge. They track which individuals, human or otherwise, have been consistent, which ones pose risk, which ones offer reward, and they share that assessment across social networks with a fidelity that startled even the scientists who documented it. What you do consistently near birds matters. But the unsettling discovery was that what you do occasionally matters almost equally. A single threatening gesture, One sudden movement, one moment of perceived danger, can rewrite an established assessment in ways that persist for seasons. They are keeping score, and they are keeping records. But here is where it becomes something beyond fascinating. Here is where it moves into territory that is genuinely difficult to process. The mockingbird in your neighborhood does not just recognize you. Research published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences demonstrated that northern mockingbirds can identify individual humans by face and distinguish threatening individuals from neutral ones after only a handful of encounters. 4 exposures. That was enough. After 4 moments of a human walking near a nest, a mockingbird had built a recognition profile specific enough to respond differently to that person versus strangers who looked similar, dressed similarly, and walked the same path. 4 moments. Think about how many times you have moved through your yard in the last month. How many mornings you stood by the window with your coffee. How many times you stepped outside without thinking about anything except the task ahead of you. Every one of those moments was a data point being collected by minds you had never considered intelligent enough to bother. The birds were paying closer attention to you than most people in your life, and what they collected, they communicated. A mockingbird defending a nest will dive toward a recognized threat while allowing neutral strangers to pass unmarked. The response is targeted, personalized, built for memory, and refined across encounters in a way that is functionally indistinguishable from how you would describe recognizing and categorizing a person you know. They know you. The question that quietly follows that realization is whether we have ever truly known them. There is a layer beneath all of this that science is only beginning to map. A layer that makes the communication between birds even more disorienting once you understand what is actually being transmitted. Birds do not only exchange warnings, they exchange emotional states. Research on songbirds has found that alarm calls do not just carry information about threat type and location. They carry urgency. They carry degrees of fear. And that emotional content is transferred across species with what researchers describe as contagious effect. A bird that hears genuine alarm in another species' call does not just change its behavior, it changes its internal state. The fear spreads as a feeling, not just as information. The yard is not merely networked. It is emotionally networked. Every bird near you exists within a shared emotional field where distress and safety radiate outward, infecting the awareness of every creature that hears it. And you are part of that field. Whether you feel calm or rushed, whether you move deliberately or erratically, whether your presence feels consistent or unpredictable, that information is being read, not by one bird, by a distributed community of minds that talk to each other constantly, share everything they notice, and maintain memories across seasons. There is research from Exeter University showing that garden birds in the United Kingdom not only learned to recognize individual humans, but structured their foraging behavior around the predictability of specific people. Birds that associated certain humans with reliable, safe feeding began visiting during windows that correlated with that person's observed routine. They had internalized a schedule, not because someone trained them, because they watched, communicated with each other, and built a working model of a specific human's daily behavior. They modeled you, without your knowledge, without your consent, with a quiet, patient intelligence that operates in the background of every ordinary morning. And somehow, that changes what an ordinary morning is. Think about what you are actually looking at when you stand by that window and watch the birds move through your yard. You are not watching nature happening around you. You are watching an ongoing community that includes information about you as a real, active, living thread in its daily awareness. You are a character in their world, not a backdrop, not furniture. A known entity whose patterns they have studied and whose presence they have already learned to interpret. The sparrow that pauses when you open the back door and then relaxes when it recognizes you is not being cute. It is performing a split-second assessment based on stored memory and communicated experience. That pause is the outer edge of an intelligence that runs deeper than it looks. The crow that watches you from the wire and never seems to leave is not being ominous. It is maintaining a relationship. Crows remember specific humans for years. They recognize faces through changes in hair, glasses, weight, and age. crow that has assessed you as non-threatening carries that assessment into future encounters and communicates it to its companions. The ones sitting near it have inherited that assessment secondhand. The cluster of crows watching you from the tree is not a coincidence. It is the visible edge of a social structure built partly around the information they collectively hold about you. You have been known in that specific community for longer than you realize. Research from Japan's Utsunomiya University found that jungle crows could remember up to 36 distinct categories of objects and their food value, cross-referencing that memory with spatial location and social context. These birds were holding complex multivariable maps of their world and operating within them with a flexibility that only appears in animals whose intelligence evolved to handle genuinely complicated social environments. Their world is complicated because the things they track are complicated, and you are one of the things they track. What sits underneath all of this, the quieter and stranger thing that emerges when you hold it all together, is a question about what these minds actually contain. Not just in terms of memory or communication, but in terms of something that sounds almost too large to apply to a bird. Something close to perspective. Studies on corvids and certain songbirds have found evidence of what researchers are increasingly willing to call future thinking, the ability to plan for a situation that does not yet exist, to anticipate needs that have not yet arisen. Scrub jays have been documented hiding food in locations they chose specifically to prevent a particular other bird from seeing the action. They adjusted their caching behavior based on who was watching. That requires modeling another mind's knowledge. It requires understanding that another creature sees the world differently than you do. It requires, in the most fundamental sense, imagining a point of view that is not your own. And if they can model each other that precisely, the natural question is, what exactly they have modeled about you? Here is what the science cannot fully answer yet, and what makes this entire subject impossible to entirely resolve. We do not know the boundary. We do not know where recognition ends and something deeper begins. We do not know if the crow watching you from the wire is simply processing a familiar pattern, or whether there is any inner dimension to that recognition, any felt sense, any quality of awareness beyond pure cognition. We do not know, and that not knowing is actually the most important part, because it means every bird you have ever passed without thinking, every morning you moved through a yard full of life without asking what that life perceived, was an encounter whose full nature remains open. It was not nothing. It was not mechanical. It was something we do not yet have precise language for. And that gap, that space between what we can measure and what might be true, is where the real strangeness lives. The birds outside your window right now are not decoration. They are not background. They are participants in a system of awareness that folds you in without asking your permission, that discusses you among themselves in calls you cannot decode, that builds models of your behavior refined over seasons of patient observation. They knew you were the kind of person who would stop and wonder about this. They probably knew before you did. The yard looked ordinary this morning. It looked like background, like noise, like nature happening around you while you lived your real life somewhere else. But the background was watching, the noise was language, and the nature was not around you. It was with you, aware of you, shaped partly by you in ways that were never visible until someone finally translated the calls. Go back to the window, watch the birds move through the space you both share, watch the pause at the feeder. Watch the way the crow holds its attention on you a beat longer than seems accidental. Watch the sparrow that relaxes when it recognizes you, performing that ancient and small and profound act of knowing one living thing from another. You are being seen. You have always been being seen. And what you do next, in that yard, in that morning, is already part of the conversation. Have you ever had a moment with a bird in your yard that felt like something more than coincidence? A look that lasted too long? A return visit that seemed too deliberate? An encounter that stayed with you without quite knowing why? Tell me what happened. I think you already suspected this was real long before today.